Forge project, diving into some of the guts of the interesting things we're doing with AWS Lambda and node isolates and authentication that a lot of the speakers have touched on today. So, the Atlassian Forge App Showcase. Now, I'm just going to take a step back before we get in and look at the apps and talk a little bit more about why we've structured the Forge project in terms of the project timeline like we have. And it really comes down to an interesting problem with software quality. Now, when we think of quality, we're not thinking of a furry Australian marsupial drinking boiled leaves. We're talking about code that has low numbers of bugs, code that performs really well, and code with low technical debt that's easy to maintain. Now, a lot of these aspects of software quality can be caught with things like code review and regression testing and load testing. But when you look at the quality of a developer platform, it's a little bit trickier to automate and process away. If you want things like a tight developer loop and logical, intuitive APIs, and some of what Pete Gleason mentioned this morning in his talk about editor apps, we described it as magic moments during the software development process, then you need a different approach to trying to assess and manage and iterate on these things. And at Atlassian, we rely on a technique known as dogfooding. Now, has anyone here heard the term dogfooding or eating your own dog food before? Okay, awesome. Most of the room, I would say. For those of you who haven't, the idea behind dogfooding is that the team responsible for building a piece of software or a platform should be a team actively using that software, so that when they merge a new pull request into master and it gets deployed onto their systems, then they're the first ones to feel the pain if an experience is suboptimal. It also gives them the ability to iterate and ideate on the platform and think about new features and improvements in order to make it a better platform. So I did a little bit of research into where the term dogfooding actually comes from. And there's a couple of different competing theories. One of them is that in the 1970s, there were some television advertisements for Alpo dog food. And there was I believe an actor, maybe a golfer called Lorne Greene, who pointed out that he fed Alpo to his own dogs. Potentially that could be the origin. But there's another possible rumor about the origin of dog fooding. And that's that the president of the Cal-Can pet food company used to eat a can of dog food at his own shareholder meetings for the company to prove that it was high enough quality to ship out to animals, which I think is kind of a more interesting, more interesting variant. But the most important part of this is that it's not just about quality assurance. It's about it is called quality assurance. So that if you introduce a bug or a pain point in what you're building, you experience it first. And there's been a few extreme examples of this over the years. The Windows NT team, for example, they were rumored that if you were a developer working on Windows NT and you had your local build on your machine, then that would actually be pushed out into a build server and then deployed back to your own machine at the end of the day when you left. So when you came in the next morning, you would have a new version of whatever code you've written the day before, which is pretty extreme. If you committed a bug that caused NT to become unstable or to prevent a boot, then you had a hard time debugging that the next day. We actually ran into a similar version of this in the early days of Bitbucket Server or Atlassian Stash, where one of our goals was to get self-hosting on Stash as quickly as possible so that we could dog food the experience. So we had wired up our continuous integration and deployment tools, Bamboo at the time, to automatically deploy the latest version of master every time we merged in a branch, which was great until we broke SSH hosting and the Git protocol. And we got into a situation where we couldn't push to Bitbucket Server because we'd broken SSH hosting, so we couldn't fix SSH hosting. So we ended up having to go and manually copy stuff over onto the machine to get it working again. So we believe passionately about dogfooding at Atlassian. And in the spirit of this, when we turned on Forge last week, we got a small group of intrepid Atlassians to come and start using it in anger and to build some interesting things. Now, we didn't prescribe what they should build, and they've come up with some truly interesting and powerful features built on top of Forge. And one of the interesting things that is consistent across all of them is that they're built in usually a couple of days, which I think is a testament to some of that abstraction and moving up the stack that we've done with Forge so far. So in the spirit of dogfooding, I'm going to try and demo all of these live. So this, the first one that we're going to show off is an app called Templator, by Forge's new architect, Rowan Voss, who joins us from the Micros team, which is Atlassian's internal PaaS. And he's built a really cool app called Templater. Now, the genesis of this, just make sure I'm clicking on the right one, is that quite often you end up with lots of documents in Confluence that look roughly the same. So you can imagine if I was creating a, oh, sorry, thank you. Excellent. So you can imagine if I was creating a call for papers internally at Atlassian for next year, I might create a page that looks something like this. So then if I wanted to apply for Atlas Camp, I would come and copy the page, and then jump in, and maybe put my name in here, and then go, I'm a team lead, and so on and so forth, and fill out the rest of the page, and save it. And then I would also have to rename it as well, Tim's Atlas Camp CFD template, and then submit that off to someone else for review. So Rowan identified this problem and said, hey, we can solve this. And he created a thing called Templater. So instead of creating a page and asking people to copy and paste it, instead you create a page and use these little tokens. So you ensconce a word in hash curlies, and then they become tokens that you can replace in a sort of mail merge process. There's a couple of smart ones as well. So here we've got, actually let me just zoom in a little bit. Here we've got a date object as well. So there's some primitive types here supported as well. So this little start button down the bottom is actually a Forge app. And the entirety of the user experience of this app is just this button at this stage. So if we press start, oops. Oh, wait, hold on. I'm in the wrong, I got slightly ahead of myself. Actually, I have 2 browser sessions going on for another demo that we're doing in a little bit. So if I press start, because I've already authenticated this app as myself, then we get a few little fields. The first is it asks us to enter a new page title. And you can see there's actually a token sitting in the title, so I'm going to leave that there for now. We can also pick a new page, which will keep that the same. We have an option to publish the templated page as a draft. And let's go Forge 2.0. And it's going to be me. So let's see if it works with that mentions. I'm going to say we're team lead. And then let's just say, OK, we're submitting this today. So we hit the create page button. Oh, that's unfortunate. OK, Forge 3.0, even more cutting edge. OK. I'm going to try pressing that button again. OK, I might just refresh the page in case I've gotten it to a slightly funny state. Apologies, Rowan, if you're watching the video later on and I'm butchering your awesome demo. So let's just... Cool. We'll just fix that again. Hooray! OK. So if we click through to this page, this newly created page, you will see that it has taken our template, substituted the participant or the speaker token with my app mention, and then actually added a date in there as well, which is pretty cool. Can we have some applause for Rowan's app, please? So the next app that I want to show off, and I think we can actually extend this demo to show off the next one as well, is an app called Document Approvals by Daniel Winter, who's a reasonably new developer on ecosystem, but he's taking to the problem space like a duck to water, I would say. So he's on the FAS team at the moment, and he's built an app for a document approval workflow inside of Confluence. So if we edit our CFP submission here, and we'll clean up the title. So you can imagine we might have some sort of internal review process. So let's add a document approval. Waiting. There we go. Now, let's just save this page, because the way you interact with this app is kind of interesting. And you see here it says document review. To request a review, add a comment to this document, request review. OK, so let's do that. So if we scroll down to the bottom of the page, say request review, and we'll say me, although I may be slightly biased. We'll also invite our friend Mia Olinik and hit save. So follow the instructions. Let's see what happens. Now, I might refresh the page at this point. Now, see, the app has changed state. So one of the things we do want to do at some point is enable apps to sort of push state updates to the UI. Haven't gotten to that just yet. But you'll see that the user experience has changed a little bit because I'm one of the reviewers of this document. So I can say approved, yes, looks good, and hit submit review. And you'll see now my state has changed to a tick. And I believe if we pop over to another account that I'm currently logged into, Inez, if we look at my notifications, Tim Pettersen mentioned you in a comment. So this is where the genius of using comments comes in. So this app doesn't actually have any persistence. Instead, it's using comments as a sort of primitive data store. But this has the nice effect of actually tying into notifications as well. So anyone who's been mentioned in this little comment, which was automatically generated, gets a notification that they need to come and review the document. And then it posts back the fact that this person has reviewed it. And I think it's probably doing some horrible text searching through the comment structure of each Confluence page in order to generate that top UI. But it is ingenious. So we come back up here. I believe I'm logged in as Mia. Oh, yep, here we go. So we can approve this as well. Looks good. Definitely not Tim signed in to Mia's account. Submit review. And hey, I'm going to Atlas Camp 2020. Alrighty, so now I want to show you another example. I think we may have reached the end of life for this particular metaphor, so let's jump to a new page. Nope, not document approvals. Forge diagrams. So this is an app built by the speaker who's going to be speaking immediately after me on this track, Patrick Struhl. Now, Patrick has built an app, and it looks like there's a little bit of a problem. And in fact, this app is impressive, but will also never run in Lambda successfully. And the reason for that, well, actually, let's fix it first, and then we can talk about why it's not going to work. So I've got the code for all of these apps checked out locally. What I'm going to do is tunnel. I'm going to set up a tunnel. So if you've seen any of the sessions that have used tunneling today, basically this is throwing a switch in the Forge invocation service so that requests from the product front end that involve apps don't go through to Lambda, and instead traverse a tunnel down to my local machine where a local copy of that function is actually running. So now if we refresh the page, we should see, and those of you familiar with working with headless instances of Chrome may know what the problem is here. But if we refresh the page, hopefully the app will work. Excellent. So this is a sequence diagram generating app. Well, actually, it can do more than sequence diagrams. So this is kind of the default state for it. And if we edit it, we get a textual representation of that sequence diagram. So the way this works is you type in a text-based description of your diagram. And here we have a very simplified architecture diagram of how function invocations work in Forge. I say very simplified. And then it generates a diagram for you, which is pretty cool. And it does actually have some other pretty awesome capabilities as well if you want to go totally off the hook. Like a Gantt chart. Awesome. Pretty cool, huh? So it's no Glyphy or Lucid chart, but it is a pretty sweet macro. Now, onto the reason why it doesn't work. If you look in the code, or why it doesn't work in Lambda, but does work locally. If we jump in, am I in the right place? I'm not in the right place. Forge diagrams. If we look at diagram.js, which is a library for actually generating the diagrams, you can see that it's trying to launch Puppeteer. Now, what Puppeteer is it's a headless way of running a Chrome browser. And the runtime that we have deployed in Lambda at the moment obviously does not have Chrome installed on it because it's not really intended to be used in a browser environment. So this is a super cool idea. And this is probably a problem that some developers will need to tackle as we go into building richer and richer apps on Forge. Sometimes porting apps that might work in a local environment to a function environment does take a little bit of work. But I think this is a super cool idea and something that we will be able to support in the future. So on to the last app that I want to demo. And for this particular app, I think I'm going to ask for a volunteer. Is anyone here a Pokemon fan? Anyone? Gentleman in blue. Like, are you like a pretty serious Pokemon fan? Like, oh yeah, okay, fantastic. So are you familiar with like movesets and different Pokemon types and things like that? Excellent. All right, come on down. Can we get a round of applause? So you might be wondering why I'm asking about Pokemon. So come up on stage because you're going to drive this Forge app. So can you see that link here that says PokeConf? All right. Now I want you to think a little bit about what you've learned about Forge today and try to figure out how this works. So here you go. Guido, thanks Guido. So first you can choose your Pokemon. So this is a little bit of context. This is a Pokemon battle game. And Guido is choosing the Pokemon that he wants to battle with. All right, now it's picking a random Pokemon for you to battle. Oof, Charmander. Tough luck.
It's wrong choice.
Okay. Alrighty, so you're going to choose an attack there? Leech Seed, nice. Is that good against fire types?
No.
Oh. Nice, nice. That looked like a pretty good hit. Just waiting for that late HP. Oh, actually, that did no damage.
That's why I said it twice.
Okay, do you want to try another one?
Let me see, but it's the wrong type of Pokemon.
Oh, I know. It's rough. I promise I didn't rig this. I couldn't know you were going to pick Bulbasaur. 8 damage, that's better. Yeah. Nice, nice. Although your Pokemon seems to be invulnerable. Or maybe he's just using silly attacks.
Maybe, yeah.
Rest.
Yes. Yeah, okay.
Nice, nice. Mega Drain. So is it variable, or does it just actually deal 8 damage each time?
Sorry?
Is it variable, or does it actually just deal 8 damage each time?
Actually, it does, I think, always the same damage.
I see, okay.
Let's try this one.
Sounds good. Is PP40 good?
Yeah, I don't know. Let's see.
Okay, so while Guido is taking care of Charmander, can anyone imagine how this is working in Forge? Any guesses? No one will judge you. Okay. Did anyone realize that you could animate SVGs? I had no idea that this was even possible. Nor did I realize that you could embed GIFs inside of SVGs. But what's happening here is the first time you load this macro and pick your Pokemon, it returns an animated SVG with 2 GIFs embedded in it, which represent your Pokemon battlers. And each time you choose a move to attack the other Pokemon, that sends that move up to the server, and then, well, up to Forge. Then it renders a new, hey, nice one, Guido. Cheers. Then that renders a new game state, which is basically a new animated SVG with 2 animated GIFs embedded in it, and then reduces the hit points for the 2 ones. Now, you may have noticed that the ending was a little bit abrupt. It didn't show the last attack, and that's because it immediately flips to this final game state. Because there's no way to sort of effectively tween between those animations. So this is crazy, but a pretty impressive use of Forge, I think. So this was built by a developer on the marketplace team. Hold on, here we go. Shubham Kanodia, who I haven't met in person, but I'm very impressed with his game dev skills on Forge. So we can get a round of applause for Shubham. So we're about at time, but if you want to follow up with me with questions in the break after this, then please do. Otherwise, please consider sticking around for Patrick's awesome architecture talk straight after the break. Thanks a lot.